Guys, welcome back. Today is a new day, and I'm re-recording an SDHO that I just recorded about a night or two ago. Got a little bit crazy in the video, and I think I'll just make that an exclusive. So I'm gonna kind of redo the SDHO, kind of and kind of not. I was a little bit all over the place in that one, and I felt it would be better if I got on here a little bit more clear-headed, clear-brained, because that one was actually a pretty interesting SDHO, but this one will be a little bit more on task. A little bit less crazy, but who knows? Maybe there's people out there that they would rather watch the crazier SDHOs. To each their own, right? To each their own. So today I want to continue giving simpler love. So if you've been watching some of the more recent ones, and it's tough because I haven't recorded an SDHO in 3 weeks. Like I record a lot of these, and then there's periods of time where I just do like the editing and the releasing of them, and so it's hard for me to remember like what I was just doing. Like right now I'm editing SDHO 53, so I can't remember what 56 was, but in any event, I think this simpler is like arguably, other than Wavetable, I would say is probably the most important device in Ableton, and it's one that I probably cover the least. And we're going to cover it again, but then we're also going to do some fun random sound design and some of our favorite synthesizers, and then we're going to resample the output in audio and then throw it back into a simpler. And from playing around with simpler, and every time we talk about simpler, just think a sampler, like any sort of a sampler. Obviously Ableton has sampler, but you only have sampler if I just looked at Merle, and he's like staring at me like he's like watching the show. He's like, oh, a show just started. I'm gonna watch my papa do the show. I'm not even just gonna sleep. I'm just gonna look at him. I don't know why I do that voice for Little Chunky. I do a lot of different voices. Smash a like if you like all of the voices. Anyways, so sampler, you only get if you buy it or if you got Ableton Live Suite, which probably a lot of people don't, but simpler everyone has. So I want to make it a point to use simpler more, and oftentimes I will use sampler for more heavy-duty sound design. But what I've been learning since I've been doing simpler a lot more, and you guys have been, if you've been following along with the SDHOs, you've been learning this too. Simpler actually has more features, and also it has a thing that's pretty crucial to our favorite sampling sound design technique, which we're going to start off with. When you do the same thing in sampler, you actually aren't able to automate this parameter. Well, you can, but you have to dig into a pretty deep internal modulation routing. So even though you can do it, you don't get visual feedback. So like we modulate the loop, and even though it's doing it under the hood, it's not moving. But because we'll be using an LFO and simpler, we will get the exact same effect, except we'll be able to see it move using the LFO. And the reason why you would actually use sampler more is because in this modulation tab, see there's these tabs up here. In the modulation tab, LFO2 and LFO3, you've got all of these modulation routings, but when you use them, they do what they say they will do, but you don't get visual feedback, and ultimately they need to update sampler. Also, sampler has this aux envelope, which is basically like an LFO, except it's an envelope, but it's like an LFO in that we can choose different modulating parameters and map them to an envelope. But as we all know, we've got, not gonna sing the song. That's another thing. If you are one of the first purchasers of an NFT, no one's bought one yet, you will also get exclusive access to the envelope MIDI song, which I'm not going to sing ever again on the channel until it is purchased. Okay, so envelope MIDI. Well, you've got a free routing envelope that you can route anywhere, you know, you're getting routed in all kinds of places, you know, but, yeah, not, so, like, basically now, you can just use Simpler and just hack around, although if you did have Ableton Live Intro, you wouldn't have those MIDI effects, but in any event, you could buy them. You would definitely want to buy LFO, or whenever it's available to upgrade, just upgrade to Suite. Don't upgrade to Standard. Standard, to be honest, what you want is Ableton Live Suite. Not everyone can afford it. Get Intro. Standard, there's almost no benefit over Intro. The benefit is almost negligible, which I almost feel like they're trying to, they know that, and they're either trying to push you up to Suite or down to Intro to save you money. I believe Suite is like $700 to $800 US. I believe Intro is $100 US, and then I believe Standard is like $400. So it makes no sense for just the tiniest bit more that you get with Standard. So anyways, let's get that wonderful Simpler that we're going to be using a lot. Record Enable. And so if you're starting off in Ableton, you're going to have this Simpler device and Drum Rack. And Drum Rack you throw samples into, Simpler you throw samples into. If you're working with drums, you're going to be in Drum Rack. If you're going to be working with any sort of like a synthesizer sound or just any sample that you have, you're going to be in Simpler. And Simpler is amazing. And I want to let you know that when you come over here to samples, everyone has samples. And chances are you have your own samples. And if you don't, you can download samples. So I'm going to look for like a bass sample. I'm just going to do bass, type bass up here, and I just want like a bass sound that just sounds like a nice tone, and I want to show you what you would do. I don't want a clip, even though I can. I just want like a good one shot. That's a problem with working with samples. That's why I like to synthesize everything, is because like, you know, like I just want like a one shot. So I'm like, how do I just get one shot here? You know, like it's really tough to say, and there's just so many of these. Okay, so here we go. So these are all one shots. Now I threw it in here, and look at these modes on the side. So what you would do if you were wanting to like play Ableton is you'd be like, oh, I like the sound of this bass sound. You would go to one shot and you would play some notes. Notice how it plays continuously each time. That's because we're in one shot mode. So just right there, if you were trying to do this, you would rather be in Simpler anyway. Now, I don't really do this because I'm always designing my sounds, but I realize there's very unique things you can do. Like for instance, this is just one piece of audio, okay? So if we throw this into an audio track, here's the waveform. Yay, you know, this is just someone was playing a synth and recorded this, and this is what it sounds like. Right? Now, because of this one-shot mode, it transposes that all the way up and down. So now you can take, so now it's as if you like had this synth. That's it, you're done. You don't really need to do anything. In fact, you even got volume to velocity down here. So if you're playing a velocity sensitive MIDI controller, you'll get varying amounts. And then you've obviously got your controls, which if you want to see it in a bigger view, you can open it up here. But I normally don't do that because I save this upper screen real estate for Spectrum, which we'll probably be going to in a little bit. So just right there, any sample you have, you can always do that. And if we had a different sample, you know, one that was like a bunch of stuff, well, you could, you know, zoom in on a portion. Meaning like if you had like a whole bunch of these, you know what I mean? You could just like pick the one out. So what would you do next? You would go back to the classic mode, and we really don't even care what this sounds like. This is where I'm going to be making a future tutorial that is going to be called like the most important Ableton sound synthesis technique that you need to know, which sounds clickbaity, but like it's true, and it's extra true because it is the most important Ableton thing you would need to know, because it applies to a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced user. And it applies to Ableton Live Intro, Standard, and Suite. So it applies to as many people. And even if you're advanced and you didn't know about this, it would be silly not to know about this. So I'm going to add a couple of audio effects on here. They're really not going to do much. Just to remind you, so we're going to do that thing where we like zoom in on a small portion, and it allows us to get a very, very custom synthesizer, which we can do, which is something that we can do with any sample. So just right there, if you had the most basic version of Ableton, if you didn't know what the heck was going on, you would have samples and you would have simpler. You're going to have bass sounds, you're going to have synthesizer sounds that you can do the thing we just did in one shot, but then you can take it a step further and you say, hey, I don't actually really like that sound, I want something more customizable. That's when we do literally the best trick in the world, and we zoom in and get a complete customizable waveform. And what's cool is when you zoom in on these really small, when you loop in on these very small ones, for whatever reason, like, you get all of the harmonics, like they're very bright, which is great because then you can use the low pass filter to remove the brightness and add in the brightness and use it to your advantage with envelopes to sculpt your sound. You know what I mean? So if you want a bass, you might say, well, I don't need all that high-end content. Well, when you put a filter envelope, it gives it that punch to make it cut through the mix. And I won't do much more talking. We need to hear some sounds. Someone said, give me the sounds. Give me the sounds, boy. Give me the sounds. Give me the fat beat sounds. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Record enable this. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but let's hit a note. Something tells me it's going to sound rich of harmonics. I don't even know. Didn't even plan this. You can use any sample. Always going to be different. No one's going to have this. Let's go. Ooh. Okay. So let's do a few things. Well, for one, I always put an EQ on every track because at some point there's going to be a need to do EQing, and you know, you always want to, if your EQ is like this, I would just go to this number one, get it on a high pass and activate it, and you're always going to want to EQ out the lowest lows because you don't hear them, they eat up headroom. So this is really doing nothing but cutting out the lowest of lows. And then I always have a compressor on there, just set like compressing it a little bit, not a lot. Your threshold might be up here, doing nothing. Lower it down just a little bit. It'll just sort of fatten and beef up the sound a little bit. I'm double clicking to minimize that. If you wanted to turn them off, you would click these. I think you all know that. I try to make sure I give as much info for as many people, and then always put limiter on. Limiter, so if the volume gets really loud and spikes, not only will it allow it to not peak and hurt our ears and hurt our speakers, but it will give you visual feedback over here. So sometimes you're not really sure if the track is clipping or not, but if it gets any orange right here, it lets you know it's clipping, so it's good visual feedback. Because sometimes it will clip, and when it goes above this 0 dB, it'll be red, but sometimes it will go above and not actually be red because Ableton's got some like enhanced, I don't know, headroom analysis metering. I don't. So anyways, what would you do? Well, you want to make sure you're playing a note and you want to get spectrum. So you want to get tuner. And this is kind of one of the things you need to know. If we play a C note, when we zoom in on these things, we won't really know what note we're getting until we use our diagnostic tools here, which you should have tuner. And you'll also be able to see it on Spectrum. I don't know if Spectrum will come with live intro, but you can download plugins that will do these Spectrum capabilities. You don't need a Spectrum. So look, we have, and I'm playing a C note right now, and I'm getting a G sharp. Now, just so you know on this tuner, I've got it tuned to 432 hertz because I'm a hippie. Yours is probably 440. I'm just going to do 430. Actually, I'm going to do 4444 angel numbers. Let's get the angels up in this place. So I'm going to play a note. It's a C. Oh no. Well, for one thing, it's telling me I'm playing a G sharp. How do I fix that? Well, first of all, I want to make sure I like the sound of this. Okay. I like the sound of this. See, it's like we've got a lot of those harmonics, but it's too high up. Oh no, what do you do when it's too high up? What do you do? Well, you play it lower, and that's it. You play it lower. I'm going to drop a pitch because I'm playing on my computer keyboard, so I'm going to shift this down. I like that. Now you might say, well, dude, but that sounds like so, like, douchey. It's like we got filtering for that. So let's put on some filter drive. Actually, that doesn't sound too bad. But what we do is we go to controls, get our filter. And we could do some of that, you know. LFO I'm just going to turn off because, you know what I mean? We all need visual feedback these days. And to be honest, I don't think I could ever use another program that didn't have like an LFO that did this. Lower this rate a lot. Let's map it to frequency. We turn this depth very far down. Little dab will do ya. Sounds good, right? It's because we're cutting all this stuff out. So now if we open the filter back up, it would kind of sound like that. So let's see what note we want to play. We're playing a D right now. Where are we right here? Where are we right here? Let's move it up. Oh no, actually what we have to do is we have to move it up down here. Oh no. Where is it? Where is the key? Might not actually matter. So here's what we're going to do. So we're playing a D, but this says we're playing a G sharp. Now I'm playing a D on the key, but that doesn't mean playing. Boy, the thing keeps cutting in and out. Hopefully this isn't one of those annoying ones to do. So I'm playing a G, D. I need to move it to D. Ooh, that sounds good. So now I'm playing D, and I'm getting a D. Now I'm playing C, and I'm getting hold on, this is weird. Okay, C, yeah. But that's so I'm gonna move this up. And I'm gonna move this offset up because I don't like where this filter is going. I want to like move. I want it more. Sounds a little lame. So for whatever reason, when you go into controls here, you know, whenever you're get some release. And I'm going to come back in your controls, and I want to look at the filter envelope, and I want to give it this. I want to have some punchy punch, you know. But in order to do, you have to give it an amount. This is what it sounds like right now. Let's give some punch. I'm going to play with this envelope. Wonderful. So then you have like a custom, yeah, and then you can like move this around. Okay, now that seems a little bit less, I don't want to say tonal, but that's kind of what it is. Normally when this gets longer, like look what happens when it gets longer. It gets more obscure. So if you like move it in, you get it tighter. See that? It's too like woggly. You got to move it in more, that means. And if you start it like where this middle point is, so like right here, we're up. I feel like that when you start, it's like above this line or below this line, it can be a lot more like bright, a lot more jiggy jaggy. And so if you try to get it on these zero crossings, it can like make it smoother. So let's go to this zero crossing. See how it's like more like refined. But if you start higher up, it kind of gives it more of like a zip at the beginning. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, so like you have all these like custom sounds. It's so amazing. It is so darn amazing. And then you might say, well, hey, I still don't like how that sounds. What's going on? Well, get some reverb on there, you silly goose. Convolution Reverb Pro is always a good choice because it makes it sound like it's in an actual 3D environment other than just some like static three-dimensional reverb you would give like an algorithmic reverb. This preset, this Arundel Nave, which apparently I guess is somewhere in Britain, I guess, or England. I don't sorry, I don't know colloquialisms or whatever. Is that the right way to say it? I don't know. Like, okay, we're in a cave now. Wonderful. Dampening. Dampening's a good one to just take these lows down. And then when, like, it's too a little bit bassy, so I'm gonna try something else. Let's go to Giant Basilica. Too much, so take the dry wet down. So like if I were to play this sound for you, that's screaming for, in my opinion, chorus. Chorus. See? Take the dry wet down a little bit. Now, if we take chorus in the convolution, Command G to group it because we are G'd up, and we do this, we can see the difference that it makes. Reactivate. Yes, and I'm playing that on my MacBook. I realized at a certain point that the way I was going to get a lot better at sound design is like I have to have both hands on the laptop, and I have to be looking directionally at the laptop. Like I used to have like a MIDI keyboard here, and I'd be like playing over here and then trying to move things here, and it would be hurting my neck, and I couldn't do it. And I was like, you know, I used to, in the early days, I used to clown on the Ableton tutorial guys because they were always like playing the laptop keyboard, you know, like and I was like, why would you do that? You should just get a MIDI controller, dude. And then I realized, oh no, it's great because I can be doing sound design with one hand, and then the other hand is playing notes, and I'm able to stare at the screen, stare at what I'm doing, because to really get good at sound design, you either have to do it the way I'm doing it, which is where I am playing notes and I'm tweaking the synthesizer, tweaking the effects as I play, which you can just do right on your laptop, right on your computer, or you can do that while you are, you know, have access to a MIDI keyboard, but like that's just not my setup. The other way to do it is you already have MIDI notes. You have MIDI notes in a clip, MIDI notes in a loop, and while it's playing, then you're doing the sound design, right? And that can be very helpful, especially when you're creating a track. You already have the MIDI clip there, it's already in the project, and now as it's playing back with your other parts of your track, and then you're able to tweak it till it sounds right. And that's why I knew that I had to take time off in my Ableton journey, which is still ongoing. It's an ongoing journey, and apparently that's what it is for everything. Everything's an ongoing journey. You just reach higher grounds, higher levels up. Yeah, I was like, you know, there's going to be absolutely no way I can ever finish a project unless I'm able to tweak all the sounds, because that's one of the things you find and you learn when you start making electronic music, or I guess what I should really just call digital music, because even if you just did like drum loops and you recorded guitar and bass, it's still digital music. I think electronic only means that it's like, you know, synthesizers and stuff, whether software synthesizers or hardware synthesizers, like drum machines. If it was like all that, then I guess it would be electronic. But ultimately, when it's getting processed in the computer, it's being turned to zeros and ones. So at the end of the day, even when I plug my guitar into my audio interface, it's taking that analog signal, converting it to digital zeros and ones, throwing it in here. So when, you know, I drop a distortion plugin on my guitar, you know, the distortion plugin is, you know, these are what's called DSP effects, which I believe is digital signal processing. So it takes a digital signal, zeros and ones, and then it applies its own processing through this chorus convolution reverb, which is then manipulating the zeros and ones of the signal with its signal processing, and it's really digital music. Was that too much, or was that informative? I had to know these things. I had to know all of these things, not because I'm some stickler, not because I'm some like perfectionist, But I had to learn all these things because I needed to know why. And I needed to know if I could figure out like the framework for all of these, then I could maximize my sounds. You know, in the earlier days, I would come up with something by accident and it just sounded lovely and juicy. And I'm like, why? Why does that chord sound good? You know, why does that scale sound good? Why does Lydian sound so interesting? Why does the Lydian scale, why is it identical to the major scale besides one note, which is instead of it being the perfect fourth, it's the sharp fourth, which you could also consider the flat fifth, which is the tritone. How come just that one note makes it sound like mysterious, like you're walking in some castle of some count that is a wizard or an alchemist, but then you play the you move the one note back and now it's the major scale. Now it's like the worst sounding scale that's like la 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 la. You know, it's like ugh. You know, just one note. All I need is one note. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, I love it. It sounds so wonderful. Okay, shift it down octave. Okay, I want a little bit more. Always play with the resonance too, especially when you got these drives on. It can do a lot. Now I'm going to go back into SDHO, move it over here just for screen real estate. I'm going to move the offset up because I want there to be, go into the controls here, I want there to be more filter. Where did our filter go? See, we're on envelope. We have to click frequency. There we go. I want it to move up more. So let's go. I like that stuff. It's like that's what an arpeggio is, you know? So like if you hold down a chord can be 3 notes, a triad can be 4 notes, 5 notes, 6 notes. I mean, you can go crazy with it if you want, but if instead of holding down those notes for chord, like, you know, you're on a piano, you're strumming a guitar chord, you just pluck them out individually, and you can pluck them out in any direction you want or do other things. And I really like the sound of it, you know, because even though like, because we're used to hearing like that's a major arpeggio, and it's really lame, right? But you know, that's because we're used to hearing that. But if it's a minor, it sounds better. It sounds darker. But then when you're playing that with like one hand, you can then play like the higher melodies, and then you get these like these compositions where it sounds like two things are interacting. So rather than if you're just sort of like plucking around on guitar, plucking on a synth, and you're just like melody, you know, do, 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 you know what I mean? Like now it's like when you've got that thing already playing, you know, it's almost like your other hand, it's like the melodies just come to it. So if you have trouble writing melodies, I can't really write melodies at all. But if there's things that are playing, then I have endless melodies. Like they just flow. Like a story wants to be told because there's something there. And who knows, maybe that's the way you write them, or maybe that's the way I write them. So I'm going to move on from this. Actually, not yet. So if I play and I move one of these brackets, listen to what happens. Actually, I'm going to lower the pitch a little bit. It's hurting my ears. Look what happens when I move this. And watch up here too. Rather than like moving up and down, see how they're all moving up and down? That means they're staying in their frequency slots. They're staying in their harmonic slots. This is staying in pitch. But watch what happens when I move it. They're going to move left and right. Left and right on this spectrum is pitch. So listen to what happens. But just a little bit of that can sound good. Too much, and it will like move out. So let's go into here. Actually, let's just get a fresh LFO, because why not? Our computer can handle it. Hopefully, should. So a fresh one, and we don't want a lot. So we want a very small depth, because when pitch goes a lot, it just becomes annoying. Like no one wants to hear this. That sounds kind of like somewhat entertaining, so maybe that's not too bad. So what is this bar? What's happening when I move this thing? Where is it? You know, where is it? What is this? Well, these are supposed to move down here. What's happening? Oh no, this is bugging me out here. That's so weird. It's supposed... Okay. Look. It's too much. Get this off. Okay. So if we move start, we can... Basically, we're like moving the start of this loop. So if we click map on the start, this is something you can't actually do in Sampler. You can do it, but you have to go to the modulation routings, and you'll have to pick that you want to modulate the loop start or the loop length. The only problem is, even though it does that, you can't see it like you can see on here. So I've got map initiated on LFO, and let me click it on start. It's too much. See how it's just a little bit? In fact, you can barely... Let's turn this off. See, it's just getting a little bit of modulation, just moving a little bit. Nothing's stopping you from going in here and doing the length. I mean, how crazy, crazy, crazy. The only problem, my friends, is even though you can do all of that, you can't do the things that I was doing with the LFO unless you have the LFO, which would, in my opinion, if you were, because I'm telling you, man, I've got nothing but love for the intro and standard users, and I'm trying to figure out how I can make you have the best experience if you're not able to purchase Ableton Live Suite. I've got to get rid of this because it's bugging me out. So in any event, what you could do, and I don't know how much devices cost standalone, but what you could do is you could buy Ableton Live Intro for $100. You're not going to have any synths, okay? So you're not going to have analog, you're not going to have collision. You will have drum rack. You only get drum synth if you go from intro to standard. You don't need drum synth. You don't get electric, you don't get impulse. These ones with the tick, 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 those are max for live. You only get those in suite. You get instrument rack, but you don't really have a need for it. No one uses impulse, and that, I think they give it to you. So you don't get operator, you don't get sampler, you do get simpler, you do not get tension, you do not get any of these. You obviously do not get wavetable. In Ableton Live 11.3, which by the time this comes out should be out, everyone gets this new simpler called, I think, Warp or Wobble or Drift. In fact, I think it's actually called Drift. And everyone gets it, so intro gets it as well. Maybe because people like me who have just been using Suite from when they began, and I only got Suite when I began. I didn't even know. I thought I made the wrong decision spending the extra money getting Suite, but I was at a point in my life where I had money to spend on seeing if, like, I basically got these visions of me, like, making all of this, like, artsy fartsy, like, hip-hop music, and I was, like, on fire, and so excited with excitement. And I remember I couldn't figure out if I wanted to get Ableton Live Suite or standard, and I said, well, if I'm taking the plunge and I'm gonna give this everything I have and I'm gonna get all the proper equipment, you know, I might as well do Suite. But even I regretted it a little bit. Like, I was like, should I try to return it and get standard? But I'm so happy I stuck with it. So I realized not everyone has the ability to do that, and especially if you, like, never used a DAW before. So to circle back, if you were committed to getting Ableton Live Intro for $100, which there actually might be, like if you get like a MIDI keyboard, like there's a couple companies that work really close with Ableton, like Novation is pretty close with them, and I think there's a few, like Akai's got a good relationship. Like I think you get like a free version of like Ableton Live Intro or Ableton Live Lite, which I don't even know if Ableton Live Lite even exists anymore. I mean, you can't buy it from the website, so I don't know what you get, but why I say all that is to say, if you were to be like, I'm gonna get a simple version of Ableton, you're gonna have Simpler, you're gonna have Drum Rack, and the only things that would be important to buy would be the LFO device, which I'm assuming you're able to buy standalone, would be this LFO device so you can do what we were doing. And then as far as a synthesizer, I would buy Wavetable, because Wavetable allows you to do all the forms of synthesis within that, and with that you're good to go. And it'll probably take you a while to learn Wavetable, but once you get good at it, because that's what's tough, you might think you have to learn all of them, and it'll take a long time until you learn the way that I teach it, which is like, all these synthesizers are basically doing the same thing. They all have envelopes, they all have filters, they all have envelopes that can be routed to the filter, and different ways to modulate the waveforms. And yeah, so that would be a pretty good game plan. So I'm feeling a little fatigued from doing a lot of talking here, but I wanted to just get into that. And I mean, look at how small this is. This was all from just that one sample. That's like, what is this, 1.5 seconds long? But it didn't matter, you didn't have to do this, but just to know that you always could do that, you know? You always could do that, and that you can actually get that, which, you know, will modulate the waveform, something that you can't get visual feedback with. And then also knowing that you've got the one-shot mode, you know, if you want to then play it outright. Also, unlike Sampler, it wouldn't work, it wouldn't make any difference in this case. You've got this warp mode where you can like warp longer samples, so when you play multiple notes, they play in time. Because if one of the things, and maybe that's what I should show, which I already did that in a previous one, so I don't think I'm going to go over it, but just to explain, if you've got like, I don't know, a cool synthesizer passage that's like do 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 do, if you hold down the note, at the default pitch it'll play, but if you play up, it'll go do 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 do, and if you play low, it'll go. You know what I mean? So if you were like, I like that passage, I want to play all three at the same time and get this like sick, thick, fat chord, you'd be like, but if you take that first one and you warp it, it'll play at the same thing, and then if you play the higher up one, rather than going, it'll be like, it's like the same speed, and then the lower one, rather than like, it'll be like, so if you play all three, it'll be like, no, I can't do it, it's too hard. I can normally do good mouth approximations of these sound design, frequency, modulation, harmonics, frequency concepts. We are the sound scientists, and I am thinking that I'm gonna do one thing really quick, and then gonna say goodbye, and I hope you have been having fun. What I'm going to do is I'm gonna open up one MIDI track, one audio track. I'm gonna put this on resampling, and I'm gonna show you just another fun thing you can do with Simpler for someone who's got all kinds of synthesizers, whether because they have Suite or they just have plugins. I think on some level, not to be too harsh on Ableton about all of these structures and tiers or whatever, I think I think there's like a thought that like the average person who's interested in Ableton has probably used a DAW before, which means they probably have an idea and they're wanting to use Ableton because they would rather use Ableton's infrastructure than like some older program like Fruity Loops or, you know, whatever program people use. Other alternative programs that are maybe outdated and can't really do, not to hate on any programs, but can't do what Ableton can do. So they figure that person probably's got samples. For a long time, I think a lot of people that were into this kind of a thing, they were basically using samplers. So Ableton's probably figuring, well, we're giving them a sampler, so, you know, like they'll be fine. And then I think there's also the tendency, because I mean, like, and I never watch these Ableton videos, but like, you know, the guys that are like obsessed with plugins, so they're constantly like downloading free and paid and stolen plugins, burned plugins or torrented plugins, you know what I mean? So they're like, a lot of these people aren't even going to use these, you know, they're going to have their own sample libraries, they're going to have their own plugins, they just want to use like the Ableton infrastructure, the Ableton architecture. So that might be why it's a little bit different, although it seems like you don't really get much more from going from intro up to standard, you know what I mean? And then you get like the entire world if you go from standard to suite. But with that, I digress, but I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. But I feel this is important to talk about because there's probably a lot of you out there that are like, shit, dude, I have standard. And like, I always wondered if I should upgrade. And Ableton has these periods every time where it's like, they'll do like a 50% off like the upgrade to like the upgraded one. So I would definitely do that. But it's also my own objective. Like I want to do everything all in-house in Ableton. You know what I mean? Like that's why I bought this thing back then. I was like, I want to get a thing and know that everything is on point. Everything is up to date. Everything is modern as possible. Everything is state of the art. I don't want to be buying plugins. You know what I mean? If you're giving me great reverbs, I don't need to go download some Valhalla reverb. You must use Valhalla reverb. You know, it's like, if I've got a great convolution reverb, if I got a great algorithmic reverb, and I trust the Ableton sound wizards are going to be putting that together, I don't need any Valhalla reverb. Like, you watch certain videos and some guy's like, yo, man, what's going on? The secret to the best kick drum is in this video. And you click on it and he's like, okay, so now we're gonna take our kick drum and we're gonna put it through sausage fattener. Like I remember there's this time period where like every video a guy was throwing this stupid plugin called sausage fattener on there, which is just a distortion plugin. It's like, yeah, listen to that. And it's like you could have just been like, throw some distortion on it, get your best distortion, put it on there, dial it into taste. That's why I was sick of all that plugin stuff. And it was almost like that was one of the parts of the journey to like explore it so well and be like, does Ableton really have it all? And it does. Like when it didn't have wavetable, you could make the point that like, no, like you need a wavetable synthesizer because that's like basically like the future state of the art of sampling, like, of synthesis. Like you would have to have that. And so it got that. And it was like, well, you can't really say it doesn't. In fact, you have all sorts of orchestral, multi-sampled instruments when you get Suite. So you could be playing oboes and bobos and upright bass and tubas and boobas and you know what I'm saying, glockenspiels and cockenspiels. What? Oh man, this is it. I'm not even doing any more sound design, man. I'm cooked. I'm cooked to booked. What I wanted to show you guys was what I showed you guys. Let's just hit a note and see how wonderful it sounds. And again, dude, any sample. Now, one thing I will let you know, if you take a weird sample and there's like periods of silence and you zoom in on the silence and you're like, hey mate, I'm not getting that sick, fat, juicy synth you was doing the other day in Southampton. It's like, well, what are you looping? You're looping a small portion of air. That's, you got to have something there. You know what I'm saying? So like, if you've got let's like, look at all this, you can zoom into any of this. But if all of a sudden I'm zooming in over here, you're going to get nothing. I do a lot of field recordings, right? So you're outside with like a camera, just recording nature, and let's pretend it's like a quiet day. and then you zoom in on one of those, you're not going to really get anything. Like, you can finagle things, but you want to zoom in on content where there's like a lot of content, you know, where there's a lot of information. But pretty much anything works. And I really wanted to cover this just another time. We're going to be, I think like the next one I'm just going to make a bunch of really cool synthesizer sounds with a lot of these really cool synths, explain what I'm doing, and then we're going to print out the sound or bounce it to audio. 1, see? And then see what we can do, throwing it in simpler for extra sound design possibilities. And who knows, maybe I'll come up with some good ideas, and maybe I'll do some digital art hangouts, because like anyone can do digital art. You just need any sort of digital art program, and as long as you can do a couple of these few things, you can pretty much do anything. And it's really fun, and that would be cool. Might even jump into some Blender, some 3D computer graphics software, try to teach about what it does and show simple things. And I did that on like the digital art one, but I think we need to do another one. And who knows, maybe I'll 3D model and light and texture a MIDI controller. That would be pretty cool. And then we can turn that MIDI controller into an NFT, sell the NFT. If you buy it, it's recorded on the blockchain, on the Polygon blockchain, that you own that. And then in the unlockable content section, you'll have the Blender project, so you can open up the Blender project and have it. And we're going to do some good things. So let's build some community here, because, you know, as I'm sure you know, this is not just Ableton. It's also like talking and learning about things. And I can go a lot deeper than Ableton, but I'm sticking to Ableton because I know most of you are here for sound design, for Ableton Live. I don't want to change things up too much, but thanks. Thank you. Snoring chunky we got going on. Oh, we got chunky that wants some kiwis. Time for a chunky kiwi. Uh-oh. Folks, I just spotted a wild pug lion. Stay there, pug lion. Oh no, the pug lion's walking towards me. Now he's running away. Now he's running to food. No, you gotta come over here, chunky. Chunky, come over here if you want to kiwi. Chunky, come over here if you want to kiwi. Chunky, Chunky, yawn. That's because I missed the yawn. If I followed him, he would have done yawn. Paw for the kiwi. Oh yeah! See ya.